Now we have our next session. We have our next session on incentives and regulations for rolling out hydrogen-based transportation systems. And for this session, we have a moderator, Mr. Sanjay Bhatia. And Sanjay Bhatia, the floor is for you now. And you have approximately 45 to 50 minutes. And then we'll be end with some questions and then the vote of thanks from Mr. Jyotilal. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to you, Sanjay.
Thanks, Shirish. So let us start the last session of this day. And we already had very good discussions around hydrogen as a fuel and the systems and around it. So let us start on the policy discussions, what policies can be made and how the other countries have done. So let us see at least 4 presentations which we have planned for the day. One will be from Ballard. Mr. Oben Olek is already there. Welcome, sir. And then we have another presentation. Second one will be from ICCT, where we will discuss what US is doing. And then we have a third presentation from GAIL. Since morning, we have been waiting for GAIL's presentation to see what production and transportation in hydrogen they can do. And maybe last one would be on the safety aspects of the whole hydrogen system. There are some questions already on that front. So let us start with the presentation from Mr. Oben Ulek. He's a director sales for EMEA region for Ballard. And Ballard has already supplied more than 3,500 fuel stacks across the country, across the world. So let us see and listen to him. Over to you, Mr. Oben.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, good morning wherever you are, or good evening. I'm joining you today from, let me share my screen first. I'm joining you today from Berlin, Germany. But I myself lived, 1 second, please. Let me do this.
So you would have about 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Okay, here we go. From 2010 to 2014, I myself lived 4 years in India. I stayed in Pune, Aurangabad, New Delhi, and Mumbai. And, keep this memory in my head very good. And just to mention briefly about Ballard, we have been designing, manufacturing, and selling fuel cells more than 42 years. The company has, as of now, a little bit of more than 1,000 employees, fully focused on fuel cells. We are omnipresent on e-mobility. There are about 1,300 globally fuel cell buses running with Ballard fuel cells, over 2,200 trucks of various kinds running with fuel cells. We are involved in 6 train projects, and we are involved in 8 ships. And we are also designing and providing fuel cell stack technology for various automotive OEMs. So far, we have produced close to 1 gigawatt amount of fuel cells in-house, and about 6.5 million miles. We do our EMEAs in-house. Our vehicles with Ballard fuel cells have absorbed close to 100 million kilometers, which provide a very important input to our future product development. And our stacks have also achieved a milestone of 35,000 hours lifetime without, MIA change. And as a company, we are fully committed to carbon neutrality and aim at 2030 to be fully carbon neutral as a corporate. This is our 8th generation of fuel cell module. I have mentioned that a number of vehicles have Ballard fuel cells. So in the past, we developed 7 generations of fuel cell. From generation to generation, we have focused on lowering the TCO and increasing the features of the products. In this 8th generation, which we are now shipping on a serial basis to our vehicle OEMs, we have achieved a 35% reduction in total life cost. That includes the CapEx as well as the OpEx of the product. And how we have done this, we have focused in a couple of things, mainly on the durability. So we have increased the durability of the stack, as well as worked with our industry partners to increase the durability of the components, balance of plant components, and also improved in the design of the product, simplified it from generation to generation. In this specific one, we could decrease the number of components by integrating certain functionalities by 50%. So what that helps is basically it lowers the preventive maintenance cost, it lowers the corrective maintenance cost, and it increases the reliability of the product. And overall, we could achieve 40% reduction in the product volume, increase the power density, and we could also lower the weight of the product. In many applications, the weight is very critical. So lowering the weight allows either to carry more goods or more passengers. We also added some in the past some cool features like free start capability from -25. This is an important one, especially where I live in Europe, in the northern countries, where there can be severe winters. So I want to mention a couple of things, especially how we aim to decrease the TCO. I want to give fuel cell buses as an example. The first start is basically fuel cell buses are electric buses, and there's sometimes misperception in the market that they are treated differently, but they are electric buses. They share the same electric drive as the battery buses. It's a hybrid battery fuel cell combination. Both technologies have their strengths, so combining them brings a very strong value proposition. And we have lots of OEMs now in the common platform, offering their zero-emission buses. Can be a battery bus, but depending on the application, they can also change some of the battery compartments with fuel cell and hydrogen and offer fuel cell buses. That's what our OEMs do. And there are a couple of examples I give here. On the top, you see a triple axle 12-meter bus. And on the right side in the middle, you see a double axle fuel cell electric bus. Double deckers are in some countries very popular. So we see now increasing number of double deckers in, for example, the United Kingdom. And in places like China or some other countries, 9-meter or 10-meter buses are also very popular. We have also those buses with Ballard fuel cells and articulated 18-meter buses. So the product platform is increasing day by day. There are some reports that have been done by Hydrogen Council or together with some partnership with Ballard, for example, with Deloitte, we have issued a report based on deep analysis. And all these reports show that there will be a timeline in near future where fuel cell electric vehicles will be either equal to or cheaper than operating battery electric vehicles or internal combustion engines, depending on the application, of course. I think this has been mentioned quite a few times. This is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Electrification is a big problem to tackle, and we believe fuel cells are an important part of the solution. I'll give you some examples how that's happening. Here you see a fuel cell bus price, how it reduced over the last 10 years. 10 years ago, we were doing demonstration projects of 1-2 buses. We have been involved in European demonstration projects since 2004, from the very first bus that was put on the street in Europe. As of end of 2021, there will be 220 fuel cell buses in Europe with Ballard fuel cells, just to mention. But generation over generation, as you see, the price of the fuel cell bus came down from upper million euro prices today down to almost 500,000 euro prices in the tenders, and we expect that to go down to below 300, approaching 200 in the future. I'll give you some performance criteria which allows the TCO to come down. We have proven more than 450 kilometers of range in the field. We have proven fuel consumption less than 8 kilograms per 100 kilometers, and we have proven fuel cell stack durability over 30,000 hours, actually 35,000 hours, proven in revenue service. So these are not demonstration projects that run empty. these are buses that carry passengers online and deliver service to the customers. And at this moment of time, in our various programs, our customers are able to offer fuel cell maintenance cost bus cost of 0.3 euro per kilometer. There's a target with number of partners to carry that down to 0.2 euro per kilometer for a 12-meter bus. And within that, we are also aiming to bring fuel cell maintenance cost below basically 0.1 euro kilometer. That includes the preventive maintenance, the corrective maintenance, the labor, all the things you need in the LCC. We have also proven fuel cell module availability. At this moment, over 100 buses are running on the street, and we track every day the performance of the buses. We have over 97% availability of the fuel cells. And some other environmental conditions that are required in cold climates or warm climates, and things like freeze start, especially important criteria for colder requirements. There are other reports which show, when we will reach this equilibrium, and it's of course a hydrogen economy question. It's not only vehicle, it's not only fuel cell, it's also the fuel, it's also other services. But if you look at various reports, either from Hydrogen Council or McKinsey or Deloitte, you see a timeline, around 23, 24, 25. That's where we expect that, the fuel cell electric buses will become actually either cool or cheaper to operate than various other technologies. Ourselves with other industrial partners are working on a project called H2 Bus Europe that includes deployment of 600 buses at 3 countries, 200 buses in each country. And within this consortium, together with our industry partners, we have made very deep calculations to compare the total cost of ownership between various technologies. You will see here, diesel ICEs, hybrid, and battery electric, and fuel cell electric. And we have included the also cost of infrastructure here. This is an important one. Our experience in the past is that talking to fleet owners, when you want to operate a few buses and demonstrate the technology, it's always easy to start with battery electric buses, because building the initial infrastructure is easier. But when you start scaling up, then the infrastructure becomes a big bottleneck. And as the scale up comes up to the reality, then operators understand and cheaper to build. And sorry, am I connected here? Hello?
So your presentation is not coming.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't sure if I'm connected, so let me de-share and then share again. Is it back on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for this. But I will not go into details. I believe there might be questions from the participants, given the time limited. I'll be happy to share further details of our calculations later. But the key message here is when we include all the aspects of, technologies and cost together, and vehicles and fuel and infrastructure, definitely hydrogen is a clear alternative for fleets, especially when the scaling up comes, where you deploy 50, 100, 200 and more buses. Fuel cell buses are very good alternatives that provide strong value proposition. And we are also very happy to see that, hydrogen and fuel cells are taking more and more attention and reality in India. Recently, we have received an order for 15 buses. We are going to provide 15 fuel cells for those buses to India. and started to build up our capabilities. We are opening actually a service center in India with those buses, and from there we'll go to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And we'll surely like to have some questions maybe at the end of the session. So please stay with us for some more time.
My pleasure.
Then next presentation is from Mr. Anuj Dole, who is from ICCT. And Mr. Anuj Dole is currently involved in, welcome, good afternoon. So he's involved in electric vehicle and heavy duty vehicle programs in India. And under these programs, he works on feasibility assessment of establishing low emission zones, assessing deployment of electric buses, and financing solutions promoting adoption of electric vehicles in India. And he would be sharing with us some examples of how US and other countries are doing. Over to you.
Right. Sanjay ji, I had requested my presentation to be shared. Okay. Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll be taking you through the experience of hydrogen buses in the United States and how the state of California has created a conducive environment to encourage zero emission heavy duty vehicles in the state. So there are 64 hydrogen buses currently operating in the United States. So this number is from August 2020. And there are plans for about 1800, more than 1800 buses to be procured by 2040 in the state of California alone. There are 3 bus manufacturers with hydrogen buses right now, New Flyer, ENC, and Van Hool. And the estimated maximum range of the buses is around 560 kilometers. So next slide, please. So let's talk about the performance of fuel cells. So the earlier presenter also talked about how the fuel cells are reliable, and this study also shows that. This is the data from NREL, and the real world operations have shown that fuel cells are robust indeed, and they have lasted for over 25,000 hours, which translates to around 4 to 6 years of operations on average, and the maximum has been over 32,000 hours. 20% degradation in fuel economy was observed after around 17,000 hours of operations, and it is expected to improve as the technology matures. And transit agencies usually replace the fuel cells once they stop meeting their requirements. So this is quite similar to a mid-life diesel engine overhaul that takes place usually after about 5 or 6 years, wherein they completely take the engine apart and perform some maintenance activities, major maintenance activities. So next slide, please. So we all know that fuel cell electric vehicles are more energy efficient than their ICE counterparts. The fuel economy has been observed to be about 2.3 times more than the ICE buses. And but despite the higher fuel economy, the fuel price has been 3 times more. So this remains a challenge currently. And next slide, please. So ICCT's analysis of costs of various fuel powertrains in Brazil from 2018 have shown that the total cost of ownership of hydrogen buses was about 90% higher than diesel buses. This is mainly because of high operational and acquisition costs. But both of them are expected to fall as the adoption picks up and the cost of hydrogens come down. And a key point to note here is that the battery electric vehicles have already achieved cost parity in Brazil. And if you take greenhouse gas emissions and health benefits into account, the TCO will actually be lower than diesel buses by around 27%. And NREL's study has shown that the maintenance cost of hydrogen buses is at par with ICE buses. So the costs are pretty similar there. And next slide, please. Hydrogen buses are best suited for long range applications, well, because they offer longer range. And so actually transit authorities can opt for a mixed fleet depending upon their requirements and nature of their operations. So this will also help them in diversifying the technology options and manage risks better. Next slide, please. So now that we've understood the performance and costs of the hydrogen buses, let's see how we can implement a zero emission goal. So political commitments at the national and the state level are very important, and India is actually very fortunate to have that. And but we also need a clear zero emission fleet transition goal at the state and the national level. Then the next step really is to define a fleet-wide strategy to move to zero emission operations. The strategy would include technology, infrastructure, operations, and most importantly, the cost. So once we have a plan in place, then it makes vehicle deployment and public tendering smoother. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at how California is doing it, because California has a commitment at the state level to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030 and 80% by 2050 of the 1990 levels. It has also set a target to reduce their petroleum usage by 50% by 2030. So all of this has motivated them in defining ICE phase out targets under the Advanced Clean Fleets program. And this regulation is currently under development, and they're looking for 100% zero emission transition to medium and heavy duty vehicles by 2045. And this is the next regulation that California has of this is a fleet purchase requirement under the California Innovative Clean Transit program. Their 100% zero emission bus purchase requirement is required for all transit agencies by 2029, and there's a mandate to move to 100% zero emission operations by 2040. And the transit agencies are required to prepare zero emission rollout plans. And they're also permitted to go for a joint procurement to aggregate demand at the state level. Next slide, please. And to support all of the zero emission vision, California is providing fiscal incentives under the HVIP program, ranging from $20,000 to $240,000 incentive per vehicle for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And to make the process easier, the incentive is applied at the point of sale, where customers only pay the discounted price of the vehicle, and about 96 million dollars worth of incentives have already been claimed in 2021. Next slide, please. So the overall zero emission policy framework is actually a basket of various programs, including both sticks and carrots. So there are programs to push adoption using mandates and regulations in the form of ICE phase out targets, fleet purchase requirements, and performance standards. And California has also established some pull factors to encourage adoption in the form of fiscal incentives and infrastructure programs. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. To conclude, there are definite niche applications for hydrogen buses, which can complement battery electric powertrains. Hydrogen fuel price is an impediment at the moment, and innovations in storage and distribution systems are important to reduce costs. Hydrogen fuel cell technology is more expensive today, but it is expected to fall with increase in the scale of adoption. Batteries benefit from more use cases and larger volumes of production. And finally, we need to use green hydrogen to address climate impacts. Next slide, please. And as a parting thought, we should really focus on the zero emission goal. India is already making good progress on the electrification front, and we should continue with that effort. There are multiple pathways that lead to the zero emission goal, and hydrogen is definitely one of them. Thank you.
Sanjay, hello. Hello, Sanjay. I think Sanjay is We'll move on to the next presentation then. I would like to call upon Mr. M.V. Iyer, sir, from GAIL. I think we don't need any introduction of his. He's the Director Business Development of GAIL. I would please request Iyer, sir, to come and present. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And it's very heartening to note that this type of conference is being held. And immediately after the Honorable Prime Minister declared the National Hydrogen Mission and stating with confidence that a day will come when India will be the largest producer of green hydrogen. GAIL, being in the business of mainly natural gas transportation and processing, and also being a part of the petroleum companies, we understand, and in our country, I hope everybody appreciates, a long, great chunk of our budget goes to procurement of oil, coal, and gas, and therefore there is a more need for us to basically look into the process of reducing this import bill at the same time, which actually translates to commuting to a low carbon based economy. We in GAIL, for the past around 8 to 9 months, we started this trend that we possibly had was the large network of pipeline, and it was thought prudent and proper that possibly blending of hydrogen will be a better exercise to reach to almost every customer, the whether it be transport sector or be it industry or be it domestic. So we started early and we had started studies because the country also is lacking in regulations to deal with hydrogen. So we started actually with the regulator to allow us blending of hydrogen in natural gas, and at the same time we are going into all these fields of hydrogen, including production of green hydrogen, which we likely to start maybe by the by the same period next year. We'll be starting production of green hydrogen, and we are almost trying to take up whatever mandate the government tries to give, maybe fertilizer or the refineries or the transport sector. We have already started studies for material upgradation and whatever loopholes of safety required to deal the hydrogen, and some studies with our affiliates have been done for vehicles wherein hydrogen blend up to 18% have proved to be saving the emissions to the tune of around 70% in the environment. And we hope to continue that. That was specifically in Delhi. So we only want to state that we are possibly trying all the avenues, even the upstream side, to produce power at a lower cost through solar, so that the cost of hydrogen will be cheaper and can be made more affordable. And we have a small presentation which Ms. Sandeepa Thakur will continue to give specifics on the GAIL and the transportation sector. So I request her to go with the presentation.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. And as Mr. Iyer has already explained to you what we are and what is the role we are going to play in green hydrogen, but let me give little more in detail. Let me talk about in little more in detail. And I'll spend a minute on GAIL, little more. You would be aware, most of you would be aware that we are a central public sector undertaking under Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, and we are about $7.5 billion company. And our principal role is to transport gas through pipelines. We own and operate about 74% of India's gas transmission network. And we also sell, out of the total gas that is sold in the country, we sell about 50% of gas. And in addition to that, more importantly, we also operate a number of city gas distribution networks in the country, in a number of cities and towns, through our joint venture companies and also through one of our subsidiary company. We also have a small renewable portfolio of about 130 megawatt, and we have a number of LPG and petrochemical plants for producing the liquid hydrocarbons and the polymers. Now, this introduction was necessary for the context of hydrogen because this helps us in explaining why our business is relevant and how it does help us in the hydrogen vision and what role we can really play in that. So we have already heard a lot about India's hydrogen initiatives, and Honorable CEO of Niti Aayog has given in detail the concept, the vision of India about hydrogen. But let me tell you that we at GAIL are primarily focusing on hydrogen blending in existing natural gas pipeline network and the city gas distribution network. That's because that's where we come from. And we are also focusing on the hydrogen HCNG, hydrogen mixed in CNG for the transport sector to reduce the pollution and also to displace a part of imported gas, which is costing a lot to our exchequer. As we see, in GAIL, we are following a two-pronged approach. The first thing being that we are trying to conduct studies where we see that how much hydrogen we can blend in natural gas safely without making any modifications in the transmission network and in the downstream segments, and therefore do some demonstration and pilot projects there. But the other thing that we will do a more in-depth study for figuring out what maximum hydrogen can be put in the pipeline network and in the city gas distribution network with minimum modifications so that we can transport a significant amount of hydrogen with natural gas. The second stage that we are following is that we do pilot scale projects and demonstration projects before we go full-fledged on the commercial scale projects. So to begin with, we had done a study which was done through one of the reputed consultants. So they studied what work is being done globally by other countries, various companies. And based on that study and based on their own in-house research, what we concluded that if we have to immediately start a pilot project, then it would be good, it would be safe to have 2% hydrogen blending in natural gas, and that would not have a significant impact. So based on the outcome of that study, we decided that let us start a pilot project in one of the city gas distribution network, which we identified, and there we supply green hydrogen. Our focus is primarily to supply green hydrogen because that's how the objective of reducing the emissions and reducing the imports would be met. So we have identified one city gas distribution network. There we are going to do certain modifications for blending 2% of hydrogen in that network. What we have, as some of you would be already aware, that the gas distribution network is regulated by PNGRB, the Petroleum and Natural Gas Regulatory Board. So it was important for us to also take approval from them because the composition of gas that can be transported through the pipeline network is regulated by the regulations from PNGRB. So we have already taken approval. So we have gone a step ahead, taken approval from our regulator for this 2% blending in city gas distribution network. And what we are going to next do is to set up an electrolyzer and generate hydrogen and supply that hydrogen to the city gas distribution network. Next step, this is based on the 2% blending of hydrogen. But going forward, what we need to do is how much maximum we can blend hydrogen in the pipeline, trunk pipelines and the city gas distribution. So for that, we are doing another detailed study to figure out what maximum percentage of hydrogen can be blended in gas and without making much changes in the existing pipeline and associated facilities. So prima facie, we see that maybe it would be around 20% volume of hydrogen that can be blended in gas with minor modifications. What those modifications could be will emerge out of that study. And of course, the main focus would also be on ensuring that there's no impact on safety and integrity of the pipelines. So this is about the study. On ground, what we are doing is, as I said, in one of our installations, we are going to set up a 10 megawatt electrolyzer, which is at a place in Vijaypur, which is in the state of MP. This will produce about 4.5 tons per day of green hydrogen. So we intend to supply a part of this hydrogen to the nearby fertilizer units and also to the city gas distribution network through either by blending into, mostly it could be blending the hydrogen in existing gas pipeline, or we would also do a study on if we need to have a dedicated pipeline for transporting only hydrogen. Let me come to the transportation part. Next slide. Let me come to the transportation part and share with you that there's already one HCNG project that was run in the city of Delhi. Many of you would be aware that Supreme Court in 2019 had suggested looking at the hydrogen run vehicles in Delhi, and that was in the background of the fact that there's a lot of pollution in Delhi, especially in the winter months. And in order to curb that pollution, various mechanisms, various schemes are being worked out. So there, under that, one of the schemes was that look at the hydrogen run vehicles. So as per the directive from Supreme Court, what one of our joint venture companies, IGL, and one of the oil marketing companies, IOCL, they collaborated together and put up a pilot project. And this pilot project was not only for like hydrogen vehicles. This pilot project was for hydrogen CNG vehicles. So a plant was set up for producing HCNG, 18% hydrogen in CNG, and this was used in 50 CNG buses in Delhi. And they have been running for a few months, in fact, for more than a year now. And the objective was to see the impact on the emissions. And the emissions that we have prima facie, what has emerged out of it is that there is significant reduction in emissions, particularly in CO emissions and the reduction in total hydrocarbon emissions, mostly the methane emissions and so. So this is one good step that has happened. The 50 CNG buses have been run. It has been established that there is significant reduction in emissions. But of course, this hydrogen was not green hydrogen. This hydrogen was gray hydrogen. As a next step, now we have to generate green hydrogen and have to see that how technically and commercially. So the techno-commercial feasibility of the project has to be established so that the cost is not prohibitive and we can, on a large scale go for this HCNG project. So currently we have, there are challenges all of us know. Specifically in India, there's hardly any availability of green hydrogen. There are some small plants here and there for green hydrogen, but then transportation of green hydrogen from those plants to the consumption centers is again, that cost is prohibitive. So therefore, the option is to set up green hydrogen plants. Those are time consuming, but then we need to immediately take steps and start moving on that, setting up these having these electrolyzers in place. The way GAIL is doing, we're already ahead in terms of getting various approvals and setting up that 10 megawatt electrolyzer. Besides that, as I said, that transportation from the production place to the consumption centers, that is expensive. Even the production cost is expensive. About what we have seen is about $5 per kg, which needs to go down significantly to at least $2 per kg. So also the challenge is that exactly seeing how much percentage of hydrogen can be blended in natural gas, for which we have done one study, but a more detailed study, as I explained, is being done. And based on the outcome, we will be able to figure out techno-commercially how it will be feasible to transport hydrogen and use it in not only for the transport sector, also for the domestic sector, industrial sector, so that we get multiple results in terms of curbing the pollution and also in terms of reducing the imports that is costing a lot to the exchequer at the moment. So the way forward is that the detailed study that we are getting done through EIL, that will identify the maximum percentage of hydrogen that we can blend in our pipeline network and also supply to the city gas distribution network without much changes. And whatever changes are required to be done, establishing what those changes could be with the minimum cost, because otherwise that will also add to the cost of the hydrogen. And of course, approaching the regulatory authorities the way we have already done for one project, pilot project, now going full-fledged once we establish how much percentage can be blended, then again approaching the regulatory authorities and taking the approval on pan-India basis for blending of this hydrogen in the natural gas network. So these are some of the steps that GAIL has taken, and going forward in line with Government of India's mission. And in the interest of the economy overall, we will be taking whatever steps are required for making sure that this hydrogen vision becomes a reality. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, sir, Mr. Iyer. Sorry, I couldn't introduce you in the beginning because of some issues at my end. Thank you very much for your nice presentation, and there are a lot of questions expected. So we will take up these after the next presentation. Maybe we'll request you to stay back for 5-10 minutes more. Our next presentation is the last presentation of the day, but the most important topic for the day is on safety related to hydrogen, which is very important since hydrogen being fuel which is new and people are not very much aware of the whole system. So we have Professor H.C. Olaf Jadek, who is actually from KIT Institute, Karlsruhe Institute of Technology, Germany. And he is a scientific manager of the hydrogen group at the Institute of Thermal Energy Technology and Safety. So he is also an executive board member of Hydrogen Europe Research, a unique public-private partnership supporting research, technological development, and demonstration activities in fuel cell and hydrogen energy technologies in Europe and HySafe Association. Over to you, Professor Olaf.
Many thanks for this invitation. Can you see my presentation?
No, sir, not yet.
So I'm actually doing something wrong because I shared the presentation, but it's not running, I see. So can you see it now?
It is there. It is there, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So many thanks for the invitation to this workshop, which is focusing on, on hydrogen technology. And as you mentioned in your work scope here, it's more about green hydrogen. But as you know, in safety, it doesn't matter if you have green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen, turquoise hydrogen, yellow hydrogen, or whatever. So hydrogen is hydrogen in concerns of physical opportunities. So I got asked for presenting some aspects and concerns of safety and concerns of hydrogen use, for example, in transportation, because this is only an example. And of course, my colleague was in holidays, and also I'm actually in holidays. So I've prepared a small presentation to give you a short introduction into hydrogen. And as you know, 10 minutes are not time enough to present all the hydrogen issues or aspects. So we have an own conference running about safety of hydrogen, which takes more than 3 days in 3 sessions, parallel running. So was up to 200, 300 presentations and also poster presentation. So, but however, I have done some things here, and as you see here, why safety? It's each time, yes, a basis. Safety is then an issue if you will have some accidents, and you see it here. Accidents about hydrogen are very famous. So it starts already by the accident of the Hindenburg in 1937. And it was more or less at end of the technology. And the fact why it was so popular was not because of this accident. It was only
Professor,
due to the...
Can you put it in
Yes.
the presentation mode? Sorry
Do
for
you have the
disturbing you.
Do you
No,
have
this
the
is not in the
presentation?
No, this is not in the presentation mode. Can you put that?
Okay. Sorry, but my presentation is running here, and
No, from the bottom, at the bottom of the screen.
So let me present it from my side. I can do it.
Yes, of course. Yes, you can do
Yeah.
that. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Okay.
Is this fine, sir?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Next slide, please. Yes. No, not slide before. Thank you. And as you can see here, you can see some accident happened with hydrogen. But what I like to highlight is it's not only about hydrogen. So, but most of the accidents happened due to hydrogen. Were very popular and famous. For example, the Hindenburg, although there was an accident in Stockholm, and Porsgrunn, and also in Fukushima, it was the latest accident happened with hydrogen. But you see here, hydrogen could raise really an issue if you do not take care about the very clear physical properties in concerns of hydrogen. So next slide, please. So taking a look on, next slide, please. Yes, taking a look on transportation, we have not only to tackle the storage of hydrogen, we also have to tackle very parts of the whole chain, of the whole technology chain. So as you can see here, in some of the colleagues before presented already, we have different opportunities to store hydrogen, also in concerns of very different safety aspects. It means gaseous and liquid and also solid. And solid means, for example, metal hydrides. And in each case, the storage system leads to a different view on the safety aspects. Next slide, please. Yes, for example, also here we have the distribution of hydrogen. And as you can see here, we will not have only the transportation via, for example, yes, on roads or something like that, although meanwhile on sea, and also in the gas grids there is the transportation. That means also the transportation of hydrogen works very different in concerns and raises also very different safety aspects. So next slide, please. And also the usage, and then you are more or less in the middle of the whole complete chain from the production to the usage. You have also very different aspects to focus on safety aspects of hydrogen safety. So next slide, please. Yes, and it's the most important slide in my presentation, and it's why hydrogen safety. And the basic of that is that the properties, the physical properties of hydrogen are clearly different to other gases. For example, methane or propane or also gas oil. And as you can see here, I have highlighted it in some slide, not some slides, but some graphic compiled together. That means hydrogen is, you can see, in red, and all others are in blue. And as you can see here, for example, the density, you should probably assume, okay, it's not important, but if you have the diffusion coefficient in the middle of the row of the slide, then you see that the diffusion coefficient is very, very high. And if you go to the right, then you have the ignition energy. And you see here the ignition of energy of hydrogen, it's also very, very low. That means there are a lot of aspects how to ignite flammability mixture out of hydrogen and oxygen, for example. Then the flammability range is high in comparison to all the others. Also, you can see here in the left corner down that the laminar burning velocity is very high for hydrogen, and also the heat combustion in the middle, and then the detonation sensitivity. And you see here by the whole slide now that hydrogen behaves clearly different to other gases, which does not mean that it's much more explosive or something like that, or much more dangerous. Also, no, it isn't. What you have to do is you have to respect that the physical properties of hydrogen are very different to other usable gases like methane or propane or gas oil. At least you can use the same technology, more or less, but there are some restrictions, but you can use the same technology, but you have to take care about the specifics of the physical property. Next slide, please. Next slide. Do we have the next slide? Yes, you can see it here, why hydrogen safety. Let me take you to the picture to the left side. You see here, it starts each time having an accident with a hydrogen source. Means if you do not have hydrogen, or if you have only pure hydrogen, nothing will happen. But if you have a hydrogen source to the air, for example, then you get into the next chain of this accident chain here, and then you will have a distribution. Then you will need to have an ignition, because it's only to have a mixture, nothing will happen, but then you have to take care about the ignition. Then, if you ignite a burnable mixture, you will have first only a slow deflagration. This is also not important accident. But if it comes to fast deflagration or even to a detonation, then you have to cause very, very strong consequences. And the consequences of that, it was already shown in the first slide of this presentation. So means, as other flammable gases, hydrogen is not much more serious or explosive. Hydrogen itself is not explosive. What you have to do is to take care about the ignition, about the distribution, and so on and so on. So next slide, please. Yes, and you see it here, flammable via explosives. That means you have, of course, explosive reactions if you have it restricted or to limited areas. That means you have to vent and so on and so on. And this is the case. And explosion is a sudden and controlled release of energy with adverse effects on the environment. But this is not only to hydrogen, this is also to the other gases. Next slide, please. I like to speed up a bit. Yes, in concerns of the definition of a system, and we learned a lot of fuel cells, cars and buses and trains today in this workshop, you have to take care about two specific systems. That means you have on one hand you have the gas system, and on the other hand you have the fuel cell system. We learned that we do not have so much accidents in concerns of the use of fuel cells. Most accidents happens in a car, for example, but also buses are more directed to the tank systems. That means to the vessels. And next slide, please. And you can see it here. So this was one of the accidents happened in the past 2 years. It was a passenger car at the filling station. And you can see here also, it was not an explosion. It was only a burst of a vessel, and there you have to take care about. And because of the physical properties, it was luckily not an explosion happened here because it was not ignited, but afterwards the whole car was destroyed. Next slide, please. And if you compare both, that means you see 6 images here from the left to the right bottom during a 2 or 3 minutes video, and you see it here. You have on the left, you have a hydrogen car, on the right, you have a normal gas oil car, and you have a pressure release device. That means when it comes to an accident or probably to a fire or whatever, so a pressure release device opens in the left hydrogen car, and at the same time it starts to burn gas oil. And you can see by the slides, after having all hydrogen emitted, then you will not have any any dangerous consequences anymore on the car, but the gas oil, it will burn further and it will bring the car completely down. Next slide. Yes, and that's why we have to take care about the releases. That means at first you have a release, then you have a mixture with air, then you need to have a secondary effect and ignition, then you will have a combustion. This is also not a terrible thing, but then you will have a pressure load, and there you can get it to and come to an explosive. And that's what we are working on also on KIT and our test facility, which is a big one. Next slide, please. Brings me to the effect, what can we do? So if you start a project, so you like to say something about the safety aspects, because running in public or whatever, you need each time to have some arguments about the safety. And as you can see it here on the slide, I like to raise your sensibility to the to the images presented to the right of the slides. As you can see there, safety, it's a kind of individual behavior. If you're climbing without any safety, yes, then it's your own responsibility. And if you carry on, now we actually are running in the pandemic worldwide, as you know, and you can take safety about while wearing a mask or by ignoring a mask. But in concerns of the technical safety, you see it here, it's more or less an unaccepted risk. That means we have to determine, and although we have technical terms, we can only work on the technical terms. We can never determine by society and individual behavior. Next slide, please. And as you see here, by definitions, we could lead safety, or we could guide to use through safety by having something like harm, hazard, risk, and safety. Next slide, please. Yes, and here, while we can do that, you can also do by the ranking something like a matrix about the consequences, because no one will raise his hand if the consequences are zero. But if you will have consequences, then everybody will raise his hand and say, okay, we don't like to have a refueling station in the neighborhood or in the cities or whatever. So what you can do is you can rank a matrix with the consequences. And as you see here, it's more or less about likelihood and also what could happen. That means catastrophic failure, or major failure, moderate failure, minor failure, or also insignificant, probably raising down to that you cannot raise. Okay, next slide, please. So, and you can do this, it's a technical failure, by filling in a complete failure mode and effect analysis. And this will help you by doing this as a program, yes, by doing this to get more or less a number of the safety, that means the risk failure. That means if it's 100%, you will do better not. And if it's only up to 5%, means that the effect or failure will happen probably not. Next slide, please. Yes, and that's what we are. What you can then calculate. That means this is a risk evaluation of FMEA. That means here you have to more or less to calculate by some factors about the complete risk. And you can see it here, RPN, absolutely value less important, but it is used to define limits and comparing with different cases. So this is what you can do in concerns also of safety. And this works for all kind of device. That means what is a device? Probably a bus could be a device, but also a car, but also a vessel. And you see, then you have also a complete refilling station. And you see, then the list will expand, expand, expand. But at least you will get an answer on a technical manner, on a technical basis. Is this what you are running there safe or not? Okay, next, please. I will speed up, yes, of course. And as you can see here, you saw already the left and the middle picture, but you didn't saw that what happened today. That means if you have an accident with a trailer, and if then we do not know actually what can happen. Also, it could be happen in a tunnel, whatever. Next slide, please. Yes, and here you have only a matrix and a graphic comparing with all other gases. As you see here, it's not very different to all other gases. And in some cases, methane, for example, is much more dangerous than hydrogen. Next slide, please. Yes, and by collecting all the high specific events, we got in the past 300 hydrogen specific events, and out of that we have lessons learned. And if you like, you can access this database. It's a running database by the European Commission, but also by HiSafe initiated, and to learn more about accident happened and to raise up more sensibility to your risk opportunities. Next slide, please. And this is a probabilistic, as you can see here. Okay, what happened with gaseous or liquid hydrogen compared, but you can go through this slide if you like to do so by using. Next slide, please. Yes, then we have also
complete this.
Yeah. We have also the compatibility with the materials, but next slide, please. You know this, that we have hydrogen embrittlement. Next slide, please. Yes, also this. Next slide, please. And at least I like to highlight one point. We have already regulations, codes, and standards. Next slide, please. And if you like to know which standards are working for which application, then you can go to the liability framework. And as you can see here, we have a lot of standards, which are, next slide, please, listed here more completely, and you see there's an enormous list of standards, codes, and regulations. Next slide, please. And here you see it's completely listed for you. If you like to get more information, next slide, please. You can go all through these ISO or TC levels. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. And also ATEX zone for a refilling station. Next slide, please. There I like to conclude, means we can handle hydrogen safe. This is clear. We can improve safety, remove further overconversion, but we have to design, and also we have to reduce costs of safety. And also we have to look for the gaps and for the missing knowledge. And we need more intensive information and exchange, and means also to improve a safety culture, not only in Europe or worldwide, but also in your specific region. Brings me to the very last slide and to say many thanks to you and many thanks for this invitation. And if you like to see more, you can learn more about HiSafe, which is an association running all the conference. Next slide. That's my last slide. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for your good presentation on safety. Even though this was the last presentation, but it was very informative, and we thank you for giving us this information, and maybe we'll look forward to more discussions in future, as this is a very important, and we have just started the journey in India. So a lot of your work will be helpful in implementing these. So maybe we'll take few questions which have come. Because of shortage of time, we may not be able to discuss much, but if Mr. Ballard, Mr. Obin is there, I think there were some questions for him, which he has tried to answer also. And since he's not there, we'll maybe Mr. Anuj, if you can, there were some questions around some suggestions on incentives for India. I mean, how can India start, since we are just starting the journey? So maybe what are the suggestions from your side which can go to the government, and maybe in the form of what experience from California and others? Yeah.
Sure. So first thing to note here is that we should really be technology agnostic. The incentives should come to focus on zero emission vehicles in general. And so basically we are doing pretty well already in terms of incentives. So all we need to do is set the goals to start with. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. And what California is doing is they obviously for fuel cell vehicles, they do have a national level incentive program for testing out these fuel cell vehicles. So maybe India can also take that route.
Okay, thank you. Some questions maybe from Mr. Iyer from GAIL. I mean, if already gases are being used, GAIL is one of the biggest, has biggest gas pipelines in the country. So you are already experimenting with the blendings, but is there any plan to modify these pipelines for transporting only green hydrogen? I mean, or there would be new pipelines required. So what will be the plan?
See, the preliminary studies indicated there will be modifications required beyond a certain percentage of hydrogen. More precisely, maybe going about 10% or 18%, we may be required to do changes. But we are planning that future pipelines be hydrogen ready so that we take care of all those at the design level and we make pipelines so that a larger percentage of hydrogen can be flown along with blending. Coming to 100% green hydrogen transportation, yes, we intend to do that in small spells wherever the consumer demand is there. We intend to set up a green hydrogen plant nearby and use the 100% line to deliver green hydrogen. So that is just in one of our plants, but that depends location wise.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yesterday, Dr. Jitendra Singh was Minister of State was referring about 2 and 2. $2 for the cost of the hydrogen and $1 for the storage and distribution of hydrogen. And maybe 2 is the 2 years timeline which he was talking about. So what are the views on $1 for storage and transportation? How far we are and how can we achieve it?
I think it will take time to come to that level. But when I said that we intend to produce green hydrogen near to the demand center, I meant that the transportation and storage charges are minimal so that we can meet the objective early instead of the time which is being thought of for reducing the cost of hydrogen in production, storage or transportation, which is predicted to reach that level somewhere around 2030.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your kind, good presentation and your information which you shared with us. Over to you, Shirish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Iyer. Thank you so much for your wonderful insights and giving us time. Now we are at the closing now. So I would request Jyotilal sir to have a vote of thanks and the concluding remarks. Jyotilal sir, are you here?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good evening. So I was the one really benefited by. I think I went through each and every point. In fact, I have noted it down. So it has been very useful and very informative. I'm sure that all the presentations, probably if we can compile it and give it to Government of India, Niti Aayog, as well as the ministries concerned, as well as the state government, will be very useful. As probably our vision is to have a zero cash, zero emission, zero congestion, zero waste, and zero vision zero. So that is zero accidents. So that means already we could achieve on the open mobility network. In the zero cash side, digital economy, zero emission. We are working on the hydrogen, zero waste, converting the waste into hydrogen, including plastics, and probably zero congestion. In fact, one of them was mentioning about the mobility as a service and TCO, as well as integrated vehicle energy management. That's beautiful. In fact, that's what is required, so that less congested cities and well-planned cities, and so that productivity of the city improves. That is how fast you move the men and the material. In fact, Transport for London is a good model which we are following. We are planning something called TFK on that lines. So this has been quite useful. As maybe I should not waste all of your time for calling individual and then thanking. But let me 1 or 2 points which I thought I should mention is, as we are moving from carbon to hydrogen. That means we are carbon is the zero and hydrogen is the hero. So we should be after the hero, not the zeros. World is zero, or the world is in trouble only because of the carbon. Probably all the wars were for carbon, all the including COVID. We don't know. We need to do research. All the ill effects, climate change, everything is due to carbon. The moment you shift, then it will be a peaceful world. New world order will come. I would like to invite any transition or a transformation. This is the age of IT, but what is the information? What is required is the transformation technology, not information technology. Information technology definitely required. Transformation is the change in the mindset. So that means changes happen by force and by source. By force is what we said. We brought a lot of legislations to ban the diesel. Actually, we banned all the diesel autos. We said either you have to convert to electric or hydrogen or biogas or CNG. So by source and as well as by force. So awareness building is one key element. Whether it is safety or even skill development, all those things are. If you either you develop the skill or it kills development. So skill development, as Professor Aravind was mentioned, is very, very crucial. Capacity building, coming together of the industry, research, academia, and the government acting as a facilitator instead of an implementer or the investor. One point which we forgot to mention was that bottom line is always economics or the money. So ultimately anything to be adopted by masses, then it needs to be viable. So one of the key things, probably we didn't also call anyone from the financing part. These are all long gestation projects with maybe less return, but it has got a serious impact. It's like railways. It's all built forever. So once you change from one fuel to another, it's for lifetime. It's a new system has to be brought. His life is what is unlimited. So we need to look at long-term financing. One is DFI is one. Then alternate investment funds can invest maybe 30 years. Your returns are expected in next 30 years or 50 years. Then capital gains bond. Earlier we had the REC, rural electrification. We had the bond capital gain. Even now it is there. Capital gains exemption, so that by people get at least 20% savings by way of capital gain bonds. I think these suggestions also can be included while presenting before Government of India. Then one of the key roles is PNGRB. We need an agency which will handle it. Just like gas, there is a regulatory body, PNGRB handles. GAIL, in fact, I'm happy to see my old friends and colleagues in GAIL. Actually, I started my career in GAIL, but then in India, technocrat has to become bureaucrat to survive. So we all left technocracy and came to, but we are slowly becoming a gas-based economy. So my request to GAIL is that they should set up. Vijaypur is a plan where I worked. I started my work. So 10 megawatt you are setting up. So why not set up another 10 megawatt in Kochi? So GAIL has already got a pipeline. My request is to CMD and the director is that set up a green hydrogen unit in Kochi. We will give you all the support. Actually, the GAIL pipeline is now a reality. So we need to have a PNGRB sort of either interest with one agency to handle PNGRB, or else we should have another regulatory body in place. Then PESO, I think we are already taken up with PESO up to 9. I was told that up to 500 and 900 bar we should allow. So that's a new revelation. I was thinking only about 700 bar, but I think yeah. Then probably we will bring it to the notice of the concerned ministries so that things happen. In fact, I should thank my colleague Mr. Jatinder Chima for compiling all the legislations in the country which needs to be amended. It's a long list so that it becomes a reality. The same thing we did earlier for LNG. Now I think we are doing it for hydrogen. Last but not the least is I invite all of you to come to probably whichever way you can think of investing on. Can be in time, some can be in ideas, some be knowledge, some might be physical investments. So we are organizing a UMI conference on 29 to 31st at Grand Hyatt in Kochi. So we would like to demonstrate some of these technology, including hydrogen ports if possible, flying cars, and electric plane manufacturers are coming. So I think we would like to use, as Mr. Heisen Motors, he has shown, he's already got every technology. Cochin Shipyard, in fact, we are building that. I'm also one of the board of directors of the Cochin Shipyard. We want to make water metro to be run on the fuel cell. So fuel cell for all modes of transport, whether it is a train, high-speed train, or it's a road, rail, aviation, all modes of transport, how best we can adopt that. So I invite all of you to this function. We will send you formal invite also. We are planning it physical event, so we would like all the industries to participate. Please come and invest in India and in Kerala in particular. So we will compile all these things. I thank once again all the participants as well as the GAIL for taking the initiative to invite everyone. And I thank my my director earlier, GAIL, Gas Authority of India, CMD as well as director for taking his time off and probably presenting it. Thank you once again. With these few words, let me conclude. Jai Hind.
Just before we conclude, Jyotirlalji, I have noted a request and we'll try to work on it, putting hydrogen in Kerala.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very
Sir.
much.
So,
Thank you.
So we can now conclude the session. Thank you all. Thank you very much for all joining this session. We will soon answer all your questions which have been unanswered, and we'll also soon share all the presentations with all the attendees and then the participants and the speakers. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for all the moderators, and thank you so much.